What if the school bully picked on the wrong girl, one with a connection so powerful it could change everything? This inspirational story follows Maya Williams, a quiet new student who becomes the target of Bryce Carter, the most feared guy in school. He thinks she's weak, an easy victim. But what he doesn't know is that Maya has a secret one that will turn Thetables in the most unexpected way. Stay until the end, because what begins with a bully's arrogance will end with his downfall. Maya Williams stepped off the bus, gripping the straps of her backpack as she stared up at the massive front entrance of Clearview High School in Houston, Texas. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and pavement, still warm from the lingering. Summer heat students moved in clusters, laughter and casual conversations filling the space around her, but Maya felt like an outsider. She was no stranger to new schools. In fact, this was her fourth transfer in just 3 years. Some kids moved because their parents got new jobs. Maya moved because she needed a fresh start again. She kept her head down as she walked toward the main. Doors, hoping to blend in a few students, turned their heads curious about the new girl, but she avoided their eyes. Clearview High wasn't particularly special. A large suburban school mostly filled with middle-class kids who had known each other since kindergarten. The football team was decent. The cheer squad was popular and the social hierarchy had been in place long before Maya arrived. None of it mattered to her. She had one goal: stay invisible inside the hallway, buzzed with energy lockers, slammed sneakers squeaked against the tile floors, and teachers attempted to corral students into their classrooms before the first bell rang. May kept walking, clutching her schedule. She was used to this routine, finding her locker, figuring out where she would sit at lunch, and most importantly, identifying the kids she needed to stay away from. That was when she saw Bryce Carter, tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless confidence that only the most popular untouchable guys in high school carried. He was leaning against a row of lockers, surrounded by a group of boys wearing Letterman jackets, each laughing at something. He had just said, even from a distance, Maya could see that he had an aura of control, the kind that made people either follow him or fear him. She knew his type. Bryce was the golden boy star quarterback, good looks, wealthy family. But there was something else the way. The students around him laughed a little too hard, the way they shifted their weight, nervous lie. When he spoke, Maya recognized the pattern. She had met kids like Bryce before, the ones who thrived on power and intimidation. She didn't plan on drawing his attention, but fate had other ideas as she walked past. Someone bumped into her shoulder. It wasn't an accident. Her books tumbled to the ground, scattering across the hallway. A few students turned to watch some snickering. She bent down quickly, ignoring the burning in her cheeks. Well, what do we have here?" Maya froze. She didn't have to look up to know whose voice it was. Bryce Carter. His voice was calm, amused. But there was an edge to it, like a lion toying with its prey. She could hear his friends chuckling behind him. Slowly, she looked up. Bryce stood over her, arms crossed, wearing that infuriating smirk she had seen before on bullies who knew they ruled the school. "I don't think I've seen you before," he said. "You knew May didn't answer." She just grabbed her books and stood up, brushing past him without a word, but Bryce wasn't done. "Hey, where's your manners?" he called out, his voice carrying through the hallway. "I asked you a question." Maya kept walking. She had played this game before. The best way to deal with people like him was to note engage. But Bryce didn't like being ignored. That's when she felt it, a sharp tug on her backpack, pulling her back slightly. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to let her know that Bryce wasn't letting this go. Maya stopped slowly. She turned around for a moment. The hallway felt silent. Even the students who weren't paying attention before had started to watch. She met Bryce's gaze, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, maybe even a little surprise. "You shouldn't have done that," Maya said quietly. Bryce raised an eyebrow. Then he laughed, a slow, mocking laugh. "And why is that?" He smirked. Maya didn't answer. She just held his gaze, unflinching. Bryce tilted his head "You're kind of weird." You know that a few chuckles from his friends, Maya turned back around and walked away. She didn't have to look back to know that Bryce wasn't finished with her yet, and he had no idea what kind of mistake he was about to make. The rest of the day went by in a blur. Maya stuck to the back of the classroom, answering only when necessary, avoiding eye contact. She ate lunch alone, finding a spot near the edge of the cafeteria where she could watch without being watched. Bryce and his friends owned the lunchroom. They took up the biggest table, in the center, talking loudly, laughing as if they didn't have a care in the world. Every once in a while, Maya would feel his eyes flicker toward her, but he didn't approach, not yet. By the end of the day, Maya was relieved to finally escape the school. The Houston heat was still strong, making the pavement shimmer. As she walked toward the bus stop, just as she reached for her phone, she heard a voice behind her. "Hey, new girl," she turned. Bryce stood there, hands in his pockets, a grin still plastered on his face behind him. A few of his friends lingered, waiting Maya's side. "What do you want?" Bryce took a slow step forward. "You got an attitude problem." You know that MAA didn't respond. Bryce's smirk widened. "What, you think you're better than me?" Maya let out a short laugh. Not nervous, not scared, just amused, and that more than anything caught Bryce off guard. "Think," she said slowly, "that you should walk away." Bryce's grin faltered for half a second before he recovered. Oh yeah, he took another step closer, towering over for her. "And why is that?" Maya leaned in slightly, voice barely above a whisper. "Because you have no idea who I am." Bryce chuckled, shaking his head. "And who are you exactly?" Maya didn't answer. Instead, she took a step back, lifted her phone, and pressed a single button on her screen. A loud roaring engine filled the air. A black Dodge Charger. Hellcat pulled up next to the curb, the kind of car that made heads turn. The tinted window rolled down slowly, and there he was. Vin Diesel. Bryce's smirk vanished. Maya turned back to Bryce, smiling for the first time that day. "Still think I'm weird?" she asked. Bryce didn't answer because, for the first time in his life, he was the one. Feeling small, Maya watched as Bryce's confident smirk disappeared. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickering between her and the unmistakable figure sitting in the driver's seat of the Dodge Charger. The air felt thick, the once playful arrogance in his stance now stiffened with unease. He took a half step back, his friends behind him exchanging nervous glances, none of them daring to speak. Maya, on the other hand, took her time. She adjusted her backpack strap, exhaling slowly as if she hadn't just turned. The tables on the school's self-proclaimed King Vin Diesel didn't say anything. At first, he just sat there, one hand on the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on Bryce. It was a look that carried weight, the kind of presence that didn't need words to send a message. Bryce swallowed hard. "Wait a second," he muttered under his breath, almost like he was convincing himself this wasn't real. His voice, usually so cocky, had a sudden edge of uncertainty. He looked at Maya again this time, really looking like he was trying to piece something together that should have been obvious from the start. Maya leaned slightly, just enough for Bryce to hear her, though she made sure to keep her voice steady and low. "Still think I'm just some random girl?" she asked Bryce's Adams. Apple bobbed as he swallowed again, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to say something, but had lost all ability to form words. Then Vin spoke. "Get in," Kitty said. His voice calm but firm. It wasn't a question. Maya didn't hesitate. She walked past Bryce, past the stunned silence of the crowd that had begun to form, and pulled open the passenger door. The moment she slid inside, Vin shifted the car into gear. The Charger let out a deep growl as it pulled away from the curb, leaving behind a high school hallway's worth of whispers. And widened eyes for a moment, neither of them spoke. The city of Houston blurred past the windows, the late afternoon sun casting long streaks of orange and gold across. The dashboard, Maya let her fingers drum lightly against her knee, exhaling as she finally let go of the tension that had been building since she first stepped onto that campus. Vin kept his eyes on the road, his fingers tapping the steering wheel rhythmically. "You okay?" Maya gave a short nod. Then after a pause, she let out a small laugh that was kind of dramatic, wasn't it, Vin? Smirked, his signature half-smile creeping onto his face a little. She shook her head, letting her gaze drift out the window. "I didn't mean for them to find out like that." Vin glanced at her in what would have been a better way, letting some punk like. "That walk all over you," Maya sighed, resting her head back against the seat. "I wasn't going to let him walk all over me. I was just waiting." Vin raised an eyebrow for what she shrugged for the right moment. Vin was quiet for a moment before he let out a soft chuckle. "You sound like me when I was your age." Maya turned to him, the corner of her lips twitching into a smirk. "That's a scary thought." Vin let out a full laugh this time. Shaking his head smart-ass, they drove in comfortable silence for a while, the tension from earlier melting away as the familiarity of their banter settled in. But Maya knew that just because the moment had passed didn't mean the problem had disappeared. Bryce Carter wasn't the type to let things go, and even if he had been scared in that moment, fear had a funny way of turning into anger when they pulled into the driveway of their home. A sleek modern house tucked away in a quiet Houston suburb. Maya unbuckled her seatbelt, but didn't move to get out right away. Vin noticed. "Something else on your mind?" Maya hesitated, then exhaled, "He not done with me." Vin studied her for a long moment. "No," he said, finally his voice steady, "but I'm not done with him either." Maya met his gaze. "You think I should fight back?" Vin leaned back in his seat, resting his arm on the steering wheel. "I think you need to be ready because guys like him, they don't like losing." Maya pressed her lips together, thinking. Then finally she nodded. "Yeah, I know." The next morning at school, Maya expected whispers. What she didn't expect was how many people were whispering. She walked through the hall, always feeling the weight of 100 glances shifting toward her, the murmurs threading through groups of students like wildfire. Some were curious, some were amused, and some, like Bryce's friends, were downright pissed. She spotted them near the lockers, a tight-knit group of athletes and wannabe tough guys, all of them throwing dirty looks her way. Bryce was in the middle, leaning against the metal arms crossed when he saw her. He didn't smirk, he just stared. Maya didn't flinch. She held his gaze for half a second longer than necessary before turning and walking to her class. She could hear them whispering behind her, but she didn't care if Bryce wanted to play. The long game, she could play it too by lunchtime. Things had escalated as she carried her tray toward an empty table. One of Bryce's goons, Ryan, a stocky linebacker with more muscles than brain cells, accidentally stuck his foot out. Maya felt herself stumble, but she caught herself before she could fall completely. Her tray clattering slightly. A few students turned to watch, their eyes darting between her and the group of jocks, who were now laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. Maya straightened. Fixing her tray, she didn't react, which seemed to irritate them more. What Ryan grinned. "No, come back, princess." Maya exhaled sharply, barely holding back her smirk. "I just didn't realize cavemen still existed." The surrounding students let out a collective "oh," and Ryan's smile faltered. Bryce, who had been watching the whole thing, tilted his head slightly, like he was trying to figure out his next move. Maya didn't wait for them to come up with one. She walked past them, sat down at her table, and started eating. Like nothing had happened, but she knew better. Bryce wasn't going to let this go. By the time the last bell rang, she was already prepared for something to happen, so when she found her locker, completely trashed her. Books dumped onto the floor, markers scribbled all over the metal. She wasn't surprised, she sighed. Leaning against the adjacent locker, a few students stood nearby, watching, none of them brave enough to step in, but all of them invested enough to see what she would do. Maya bent down, picking up her books one by one, stacking them neatly. Her hands didn't shake, her expression didn't waver. She could feel Bryce watching from across the hallway, waiting, so she gave him nothing. She stood, shut her locker, and walked away without a word that more than anything seemed to unnerve him. That at night, at home, Maya sat at the kitchen table, tapping her fingers against the wooden surface, as Vin Diesel leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her closely. "They trashed my locker today," she said. Finally, Vin raised an eyebrow. "That's their best move." Maya smirked for now. Vin nodded slowly. "So what's yours?" Maya was quiet for a moment. Then finally she smiled. "I'm going to let him dig his own grave." Vin grinned. "Now that's my girl." Maya leaned back in her chair, feeling the familiar thrill of control settling into her bones, because Bryce Carter thought he was the one running the game, but Maya was just getting started. Maya knew exactly what she was doing. She had seen guys like Bryce before, big talkers, full of themselves, always needing an audience to validate their cruelty. They thrived on the reactions they got, on the fear instilled, on the power they thought they held. But the truth was, guys like Bryce weren't as invincible as they wanted everyone to believe. They made mistakes, and Maya, she was patient. She would let him keep digging his own grave until there was no way out. The next morning, she walked into Clearview High like nothing had happened. The whispers were still there, but they were different now. Yesterday, people had been whispering about the girl who had Vin Diesel pick her up in a muscle car today. They were whispering about what Bryce had done to her locker. The school was split. Some thought it was hilarious. Others thought Bryce was just embarrassing himself, and Maya could feel it shifting. The moment people started questioning the king's authority, his reign became weaker. Bryce was leaning against the lockers as usual, surrounded by his group of jocks. They were laughing about something, probably another one of their cruel jokes, but when Maya walked by, the conversation faltered. Bryce's eyes flicked toward her, waiting for a reaction, some kind of acknowledgement that she was still bothered by what had happened yesterday, but she didn't give him one. She walked right past him without even pausing. That alone made High's expression tighten. By lunchtime, she could feel the tension building. Bryce wasn't used to being ignored. He thrived on control, and Maya wasn't playing by his rules. He needed to do something bigger, something public. So she wasn't surprised when she walked into the cafeteria and saw him sitting at his usual table. A smirk stretched across his face as he called out loudly, "Hey, Maya, you still crying about your little locker?" The cafeteria quieted slightly, students glancing between them. Maya didn't even flinch as she grabbed her tray and walked past him to her usual seat. But Bryce wasn't finished. "Guess you can't handle it, huh? Maybe your big bad daddy should come. Fight your battles for you? That got more attention?" A few chuckles, a few uneasy glances. Maya finally looked at him. "It's funny," she said, her voice calm. "You keep bringing up my dad like you're not the one who almost pissed himself when he saw him." The cafeteria went dead silent. Bryce's face darkened. His friends shifted awkwardly, unsure if they should laugh or pretend they didn't hear it. Maya took a slow bite of her food. Here ye's never leaving Bryce's. She wanted him to sit with that feeling, that embarrassment, that vulnerability, because guys like him didn't know how to handle being made into the joke. Bryce CL, his jaw forcing a laugh, though it was tight-strained. "You think you're tough, huh?" he said, walking around like you own the place. "Just because you got some rich, famous daddy to pick you up in a fancy car." His voice carried loud enough for everyone to hear. "What, you think you're better than us?" Maya tilted her head slightly. "No," she said simply. "I just don't need to prove anything," and that was the difference. Bryce spent his entire life proving he was the toughest, the strongest, the most untouchable. Maya didn't need to prove anything because she knew who she was, and that more than anything made him furious. That's when she saw it, the moment. Bryce made his decision, the way his muscles tensed, the way his hand curled into a fist before he quickly forced it to relax. He wasn't done. He was going to try something worse, and Maya was ready after school. She kept her pace slow as she walked toward the parking lot. She knew Bryce would be waiting, and sure enough, there he was, leaning against. His car, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His friends weren't with him. This time, this was just between them now. Maya stopped a few feet away, raising an eyebrow. "Let me guess, another brilliant speech about how I don't belong here." Bryce exhaled sharply through his nose. "Nah, He said, "I just want to know one thing." Maya folded her arms. "And what's that?" Bryce studied her for a long moment. Then said, "Why don't you fight back?" His voice wasn't mocking this time. It wasn't cocky or cruel. It was something else, genuine curiosity. I considered the question for a second, then shrugged because I don't need to. Bryce scoffed, shaking his head. "That's not how it works, Williams. People like me, we push. And people like you either push back or get run over." Maya took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Or maybe people like me, wait. We let people like you keep pushing, keep making mistakes, keep proving to everyone how weak you really are. And then when you're standing in the middle of the mess you made, we don't have to do anything. You've already destroyed yourself." Bryce stared at her, and for the first time, Maya saw something flicker in his expression. Doubt, but he covered it quickly. "You think you got me figured out," he said, forcing a smirk. "You don't know a damn thing about me." Maya studied him. "Maybe not, but I know you're scared." Bryce's entire body went rigid. "I'm not scared of you," Maya smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Not of me," she said, "of being irrelevant, of losing, of waking up one day and realizing that no one cares about you unless you're making someone else feel small. That's what really scares you, Bryce." He clenched his jaw, his nostrils flaring slightly. Maya could see the war happening inside his head, the need to lash out, to take control back. But there was nothing he could say, nothing he could do, because deep down he knew she was right. Maya shook her head. "I don't need to fight you, Bryce. You're already fighting yourself." She turned and walked away, and for the first time since she'd met him, Bryce didn't have a comeback that night. Maya sat at the kitchen table, swirling the ice in her drink, as Vin Diesel leaned the counter watching her. "Something happened today," she said finally. Vin raised an eyebrow. With Bryce, Maya nodded. "I think I got in his head." Vin smirked. "Good," Maya exhaled, "but that doesn't mean he's done." Vin studied her for a moment, then walked over and sat down across from her. "Do you want to be done?" Maya frowned. "What do you mean?" Vin leaned forward slightly. "You could end this right now. Call him out. Embarrass him in front of the entire school. You got more power than you think." Kid Maya was quiet. For a long moment then, finally she shook her head. "No," she said. "I want him to end it himself." Vin grinned. "Smart." Maya leaned back, stretching her arms above her head. "Yeah, but it's going to take patience." Vin chuckled. "Good thing you got plenty of that." Maya smirked. "Yeah, I do," and she knew it was only a matter of time before Bryce Carter destroyed himself. Maya knew the game was coming to an end. Bryce had pushed and pushed and pushed, waiting for her to break, but instead, he was the one unraveling. She saw it in the way his eyes darted around when she walked into a room, the way he seemed tenser every time someone mentioned her name, the way his friends no longer laughed as easily at his jokes. He had always been the one in control, the one with all the power, but now he was grasping at straws, desperately trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through his fingers. The final nail in the coffin came. 2 days later, the school was buzzing about it before Maya even arrived that morning. She stepped through the front doors and immediately caught the hushed voices, festivalled laughter, the way people huddled together, whispering and glancing toward their lockers. Something had happened, and she had a feeling she already knew what it was. She made her way toward the crowd that had gathered near Bryce's locker. Students were staring, some snapping photos with their phones, others murmuring in disbelief, and there plastered all over the metal door was a collection of printed screenshots, messages, comments, direct conversations. Every single cruel, vile, degrading thing Bryce had ever said about people behind their backs. Some were about students. In the school, people he had pretended to be friends with only to turn around and mock them. In private, others were worse, comments about teachers' racist and sexist remarks, things that couldn't be laughed off as jokes. But the worst part, the timestamps on those messages showed they weren't from years ago. They were recent. Bryce shoved his way through the crowd, his face pale, his eyes widening, as she saw what had been posted. "What the hell is this?" His voice was sharp, his hands trembling slightly as he ripped the papers off the locker. But it was too late. The damage was done. Maya didn't need to say a word. She simply leaned against the opposite locker, arms crossed, watching as Bryce's reputation crumbled before his eyes, watching as the same people who used to laugh at his jokes now looked at him with disgust, watching as his friends slowly stepped away, distancing themselves, unwilling to go down with him. Bryce turned, his eyes locking onto hers. There was no cocky smirk this time, no arrogance, no false bravado, just pure, unfiltered rage. "You did this," he hissed, his voice low, shaking with barely contained fury. Maya tilted her head slightly. "Did I?" His nostrils flared. "You think you're so smart, huh? You think this makes you better than me?" Maya took a slow step forward, her voice calm but firm. "No, Bryce, I think this makes you exactly who you are. The only difference is now everyone else sees it too." His fists clenched at his sides, his whole body vibrating with anger for a second. She thought he might actually lose it, might actually take a swing at her right there, in the middle of the hallway, but he didn't. He couldn't, because if he did, it would only prove her right. Instead, he turned on his heel and stormed off, shoving past students as he went. But Maya knew that no matter how far he ran, he couldn't escape. This, his kingdom, had fallen, and there was no rebuilding it. That afternoon, as she walked out of school, she found Vin Diesel leaning against his Charger, waiting. He wore his usual calm expression, but there was something else in his eyes, something proud. She slid into the passenger seat, exhaling slowly. Vin didn't start the engine right away. He just looked at her. "It's done, huh?" Maya nodded. "It's done." Vin studied her for a moment, then smirked. "You didn't even have to throw a punch." Maya smiled, resting, her head back against the seat. "Didn't need to," he chuckled, finally turning the key in the ignition. The Charger rumbled to life as they pulled away from the school. "So what now?" Maya thought about it. Thought about the past few weeks, about everything that had led up to this moment, thought about how much had changed, not just with Bryce, but with herself. She turned to Vin, a small grin playing on her lips. "Now I finally get to enjoy high school." Vin laughed, shaking his head. "That's my girl," and as they sped down the road, the weight that had been pressing on Maya's chest for so long, Finn finally lifted. She'd won, not by being louder or stronger or more ruthless, but by being smarter, by being patient, by letting the truth do all the work for her. And as for Bryce Carter, he was just another cautionary tale, a reminder that power built on fear never lasts, and that sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should fear the most.